Well, I'm delighted to be here tonight and really excited at seeing the idea of this One Just World series coming to fruition. This year marks an important milestone in Australia, 100 years of women's suffrage. Much has changed for women, and I won't review a century of developments here. I simply invite you to reflect on what women can do now that your grandmother couldn't. Equally, despite a century of gains, struggles, advocacy and organising, international conferences and conventions, gender equality has not been achieved anywhere, and in many countries, and in parts of our own country, women are very, very far indeed from being able to realise their own rights. Not a single country has achieved gender equality, and by that I mean equal rights, responsibilities and opportunities for women and men, girls and boys. Equality doesn't mean that women and men will be the same, but that women's and men's rights, responsibilities and opportunities will not depend on whether they are born male or female. Equality between women and men is a human right. It is also a precondition for sustainable, people-centred development. Gender inequalities are greatest in developing countries, and the consequences are more immediate and dramatic, as these statistics here illustrate. And gender inequality has a woman's face. For millions of women, inequality has very real, direct, personal and daily costs. Violence against women and girls remains a present reality in women's lives. According to a 2006 study from the UN Secretary-General, violence against women is the most common but least punished crime in the world. And it is a crime that perpetuates and deepens poverty, limiting women's ability to contribute socially and economically. Violence and the fear of violence is at the heart of what needs to change. And we need men to join women as agents in that change, because all too often, violence against women, particularly in the home, is still regarded by men as a private family matter rather than a crime and a threat to human security and productivity. The impact of supporting communities to tackle violence is profound. I want to share with you a story from Cambodia, where IWDA is assisting communities to address the legacy of that country's violent history. We're working with local organisations in remote villages to change community attitudes and behaviours around violence against women, involving men and boys and local authorities. Sitting with communities in Siem Reap, I heard stories of a village provided with funds, support and expertise to address the high levels of violence against women. With these funds, the women and men nominated their own male and female trainers, the men to work with the men, the women to work with the women. And the transformation in this village spilled out into the wider community. The men undertook anger and violence and rage workshops to understand the causes of their anger, frustration and violent actions, and to confront the violence that still permeates that community as a result of the atrocities of the Pol Pot regime. They moved from these deeply personal workshops to exploring the legal and gender dimensions of violence and to utilising the arts as forms of expression and therapy. They are now looking at micro enterprises and engaging in work to deliver sustainable incomes. The women of this village, through their workshops, also used art to address security and self-esteem, power relations, laws, the creation and sustenance of safe houses and support networks. They are now working toward producing goods and services through their own micro-enterprise programs to give themselves and their children a chance of a better life, of education, employment and freedom from fear. I witnessed that day what happens when people feel safe and connected and when fear is replaced by trust. All sorts of cooperation, initiative and change are possible at that point. Education is at the heart of change for women. We might think of illiteracy as not being able to read or write, and yet so often it means that you also can't count or recognise numbers such as dates. When women are prevented from getting an education, and when men around them can read and write, it provides another excuse to limit those women's access to the world outside their homes. Restricted access to education and vocational training, heavy workloads at home and in unpaid domestic and market activities, labour market discrimination, often limit women's participation in paid work, lower their productivity and reduce their wages. In developing contexts, few women can access the credit markets, capital, land and training needed to start a small business. In Sri Lanka, Kanta Shakti, or Strength of Women, has supported over 600 women to rebuild their lives in their homes in the wake of the 2004 tsunami, to start small businesses and learn new trades. Women are organised into small self-help groups and pool savings. They make small loans, share skills and information and provide mutual support. And these groups have been critical in the healing and rebuilding process. Access to even small amounts of credit with appropriate training in business skills and support is life-changing for women as long as they are supported to negotiate their workloads at home. Women's empowerment is central to helping families and communities escape poverty. The World Bank puts it this way: when you educate a woman, you educate a family. Give a woman health care and a family has health care. An economically secure woman means an economically secure family. 100 years after winning the right to vote, women's right to political participation is a long way from being realised in many parts of the world.